Welcome into another episode of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. I'm your host, Ronnie Moore. My co-host, as always, Kyle Jessie, is actually, I guess, on location in another state, basically another country. I almost said another country, but you are basically in another country in the upper Midwest. And you were in Lake Oahe last week, and now you're at the Mississippi River in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Thank you for taking a couple minutes in your hotel room to knock out a podcast with me. I'm in the Bassmaster Studios today because could not get the remote studio at home. Could not plan that out timing wise. So Kyle, how's it been? You're 1 week done. We got 1 week left of the last road trip of the Elite Series season, man.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the end, but I'm also looking forward to this final event for sure. There's a lot at stake. Obviously, there's no lack of storylines. We talk about this every year. The last event, there's always going to be a ton of storylines, and I think the same thing is going to be true here. A lot to get into. Obviously, Lake Oahe was an interesting tournament. Not necessarily from a fantasy fishing standpoint for me, but yeah, it was a really interesting tournament. I mentioned this the last time we were on, but I'd been to South Dakota before, but not necessarily that area. So it was really pretty, really cool, and fishing was definitely interesting. But looking forward to a tournament where there probably is going to be a little bit more diversity than there was at Lake Oahe.
A couple more people around as well. It
Yeah.
seems like they call it the big sky country and wide open spaces because you probably have 20 acres per person, and per capita or whatever it is. And so Mobridge being a small community, but they got to host an Elite Series event right across from Takeoff, across the river, across the lake on the west side was the Sitting Bull Monument for, an honorary, tomb and grave marking monument type deal. Very cool to see the history there, not only for the lake, but also the country. Some of these Native American figures have been, in stories that we've read about for a long time. And so it's cool to see some of that. And then obviously the fishing. So one thing that it's just reeks in the comments is people just frustrated about forward facing sonar and it's boring. And so let's get into that real quick before we transition into fantasy fishing for the Mississippi River. But when it comes to that, it wasn't much different in past years. It's just, it wasn't forward facing sonar. It wasn't a end all be all. And that's not an end all be all, and what it was regular 2D sonar or down imaging. And people were staring at their graph, trying to figure out what they're fishing there and doing that. So obviously in between, not knowing where structure or fish were, they might fish and cast around. But when you're out there and you're in 15 to 25 feet of water, you were out there not far from these anglers, on their spots. It's just hopeless sometimes bottom contour wise to be able to find some of these things, especially with pelagic smallmouth, seeing how much these smallmouth were moving, how they were locked to the bottom. And when you catch one, they'd come up off the bottom. And so for you as someone covering the sport, I mean, do you feel that forward facing sonar has gotten out of hand? Or do you think, every single step of the way, whoever had they went from a flasher to 2D. Once they had 2D, it was probably considered overpowered and everyone got 2D. And then we get side imaging and that's the best thing. And then everyone gets it. And so the deal is it's not an unfair thing. And it's not, the people who are winning now would have won in these tournaments probably before. Most of the time, there's obviously some more domination that can happen, but it's all in perspective of as we make advancements, everyone gets those advancements. It's still tough. It's still competitive. And some of the guys in the Angler of the Year race has not changed from what we'd expect. You've got a couple old school guys, you got a couple new school guys, and they're all just intertwining, intermingling there. So it's not like these anglers are not skilled. So what's your takeaway is how hard it would have been, like it was in 2018, to catch fish offshore without some of those things because of how the fish were moving this week?
I'd say it's just another tool, right? I mean, that's what everybody says, but it's the truth. So you look at that tournament specifically. I think that everybody knew with a pretty obvious that forward-facing sonar was going to be a big deal. You hear all this about pelagic smallmouth. They move around, they roam around, they suspend, chase bait. I mean, naturally, that's one of the most applicable uses for forward-facing sonars, to be able to see those fish that are suspended. Well, it's like you said, there were still a lot of the same things that were happening in 2018 with dragging a Carolina rig, fishing rock shoals and points, doing the same things where, forward facing sonar, you might have had it on and they might have been using it, but it's not the reason they were catching those fish. And, it's just different now because that's just part of the game we play. And like you said, I mean, think the reality of it is the guys that are good at catching them off the bank are good at catching them off the bank. I mean, that's just whether they're using 2D, or side scan to find the structure or whatever the case is. I just think it's an extra tool now to help them target those fish, individual fish and things of that nature. So, I mean, me personally, I know you are as well, but like I prefer shallow water power fishing. So like it's not something I use a whole lot personally, but I can understand wholeheartedly with having experience using it that these guys, that's just the way of life now. I mean, that's just, you're going to have to use forward facing sonar or you kind of get left behind, or you're John Cox and you just don't need it at all.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know. I mean, I think it's just another tool. I think that people might not like it because it's new and it's different. And like you said, I think people have that negative mindset towards it, but I think it's just kind of part of the bass fishing world we live in now. And I think that there's going to be diversity where there's tournaments where, it's going to play big time. And then there's tournaments where like it won't factor at all. So I think it's just a mixture. And I think people are just getting used to it, if I had to guess.
And trust me, as someone who watches every single second and talks about every single minute of Bassmaster live, like 28 hours throughout the week, that I'm either, if I'm not live and Dave and Davey are doing the commentary, I'm watching it. Like I'm seeing it. I don't enjoy seeing an angler's back all day long and their head bent down. Like that's not my favorite tournament to cover, but
Sure.
It doesn't make it a boring tournament. It doesn't make it useless. We saw the backs of anglers for generations up north for smallmouth fishing. I mean, that's just the way it is. That's just that style. And we always have those tournaments at the end of the year. And Kyle, do you think that cost is a reason that people will hate on forward facing sonar as well? That some of it's not as accessible as maybe 2D was. I guarantee you the cost back then, though, it was probably higher than other things. And so people had to splurge on it as well. But with everyone and the boating industry and the fishing industry and how expensive things are getting, adding forward facing sonar and the transducers that you have to have, and every year it's a different transducer and the cost of those. Do you think that is the reason why it's not as, or it's hated on a little bit more, because it's not quite as accessible to every single angler out there? I mean, I guarantee you there are plenty of people fishing local tournaments with 2 forward facing sonars out there that are just getting whipped by a 7'6" flipping stick, because it does not make the angler the best. It makes the angler better because they learn more, they're able to catch more fish. I asked Mark Frazier this exact thing. He qualified for the Elite Series in 2020, as recently as 2020. Qualified through the opens, fishing all of them without forward facing sonar until the final event of the season. He fished Lake Hartwell, which is a pelagic spotted bass in the fall, roaming off points type deal. And he said that was the first time he did it. And now he has one, obviously. And so he's learned how to fish with it, and he's learned to fish without it. And he said, dude, I fished Rayburn that year in 2020 with a marker buoy. When I'd find like a brush pile, I'd put a marker buoy out and I'd triangulate my area and I'd catch fish. I saw anglers actually like in that tournament, like hooked up with a marker buoy, like the fish would jump and get in their marker buoy and they'd end up landing the fish. But long story short, I mean, there are guys who most, if not all of the Elite Series pros qualified without forward facing sonar. But when you do it for a living, there's no way in the world I'm going back to a leather football helmet, or I'm going back to Converses on the hardwood for the NBA. I'm wearing the best shoes possible, wearing the best helmet possible. I'm using the best equipment possible if you're doing it for a career and a living. So it's non-essential for local tournaments to win tournaments. I don't have it. You don't have it. Like, it's just non-essential. But it is a tool that the top levels, if you want to be competitive, you at least need to have it. Maybe not use it every event, but you need to have it at your disposal just in case.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's plenty of examples of guys being competitive and or winning tournaments where forward-facing sonar wasn't even a factor. I mean, the thing that came to my head instantly was Gussie last year at the Tennessee River was doing it all off 2D. So, I mean, it's the same thing you were talking about. These types of tournaments, regardless, for as long as you and I have been alive and covering, or even just watching as fans, like looking down at your graph has always been a thing at these tournaments, whether it's 2D sonar or now forward facing sonar. So, I mean, like I said, it's just an additional thing that it absolutely makes it more, it makes these fish more accessible to see and catch and things of that nature. But, what's interesting, and a lot of guys have talked about it, there's going to be a resurgence of, guys being able to catch them shallow because there's going to be more people moving out there. I mean, things just adapt. I mean, things change. Yeah, I think your point, is well made there with the shoes and basketball. I mean, everything adapts and it changes, and people like it. You can don't like it. It really doesn't matter. But things just evolve over time. Music, I mean, you name it, everything evolves, and people always have a problem with it. So it's just kind of is what it is, and I'm certainly not one of those that has a big problem with it. I mean, it's just like I said, I've used it enough.
Something to talk about for sure.
Been in boats, I've fished with basically everybody I fish with has it, but at the same point, I'm like you said, I don't think it's necessary, and I think that a lot of guys would agree with that.
And I think that when people look down at their graph in the past, it had a lot less information, so they could look back up because they're like, well, there's nothing there. Okay. Well, nowadays, if there's information to be had down there, they're going to look around and find it. And the way it allows you to learn about fishing, learn about fish habits, the way they react to baits, knowing how other species react, it's only making the angler smarter. So when people say it's taking away the skills, it might take away your natural instincts, but you're going to learn something from it as well. So that's my only thing. As someone who doesn't use it religiously, but I see the value in it, it's something that just needed to be talked about, because I don't know why in this sport I guess it's other sports as well, but why it's like the need to tear down the best in the world as if they're not good, when they could go to every local wildcat and jump in and probably get top 2 or 3 in a lake they've never been to against people who fish it all the time. That's just a different breed of fishermen. In our sport, it's so hard to tell the difference on somebody who could be a pro and not be a pro. You could dominate a lake. You could dominate Lake Hamilton back at your home lake. You could dominate it. And the second you go to Dardanelle, or the second you go to I don't know, the Arkansas River, the second you go to Beaver Lake, you're not dominant. Whereas a guy like Jason Christie wins all around the state before he goes to a national level, and then he dominates there. You just don't know what local stick from your hometown. It's the same thing as football. Every single high school produces a 5-star player, and that 5-star player goes to Alabama, and half of those 5 stars don't play. And they were the best in their town, and they were all state, and they don't play. It's the same thing. There are great anglers who will not make the Elite Series, and that's fine. They're still great anglers. They're just not the greatest of the great. There's got to, like that Instagram reel audio is, Mama said there's got to be the baddest, so why not be the baddest? There are some anglers who are the baddest, and there are some anglers who just won't ever get there. And so that's not hate. That's just a natural skill that then they combine with new technology, new information that makes them one of the best in the world. So that was just something I wanted to get on, not a soapbox, but yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add to your point. I mean, you're talking about sports. I've always said this, and I think there's so many correlations between pro golf and fishing, obviously right now more than ever with the, what's going on with pro golf. But, as far as golfers go, as far as golfers go, I mean, it's the same way. Like the gap between like a really good golfer, like a professional golfer, and like a maybe just a good local golfer. I mean, it's a big gap. I mean, it's a really big gap. And like you said, I'm not saying that to, shoot anybody's hopes down or anything like that, but you're talking about the best of the best. Like they're going to take every advantage they can to be as competitive as they can, because that's how they're making their living. So why would you not use this technology? It's almost like people just expect, them not to use forward-facing sonar. Like we're going to respect them more if they don't use forward-facing sonar. Like that's just not reasonable. I mean, it gives, like you said, it gives them a competitive advantage, and they all have it now, basically. With the exception of maybe one. So I mean, I don't know.
And he has them, but we obviously see him just struggle with it at times, and so he's going back to his roots at the Mississippi River with John Cox, but. Yeah, it's one of those things where, in 91st place, Ronnie Moore had 6 pounds in the elite event and got dead last. But dang, I love the heck out of him because he did it his way and he went home with $0. And I am so proud of him for sticking to his guns and boycotting it. What are we doing? So that's
how I feel about it.
Yeah. After about 3 events of 91st without using it, you'll want to make the classic. So you'll need to figure out how to do something and compete. So,
no doubt.
Especially, when you have a guy who is, if this was a video game, this angler is an 89 overall and this angler is an 89 overall. This angler doesn't use all of the abilities and skills out there for him, and this one does. This one may jump him in the rankings. And so that's the deal every week with it. Trying to get my thing clearing up, even though people probably don't even want to see me anyways. Well, Kyle, let's make a transition to some fantasy recap real quick. I had a pretty good fantasy fishing run there at Oahe. And during the lake, I moved up to 74th overall in the world. I'm at 16,728th place, 74th overall, 99.6%. I won in our Bassmaster employee group. I think this is the second out of the last 3 events that I've won there. So I'm gaining. I told you at the end of the year I was going to gain some momentum and really put in some work. So I think my total for this last event was 2,062 because I got 350 points from Austin Felix on top of him winning, because he got double points for winning the event. He had the biggest bag of the tournament, and then also he led 2 days. So that's an extra 10 points there. So 40 for big bag, 10 for leading 2 days total, and then 300 for winning and 300 for the bonus. So huge output out of Felix. That's given me a little bit of a lead over you now, even though your Rapala team was not the best. That's the way we'll put it, not the best. Your Drain the Lake team was not too shabby, and I gained 200 points on you, which means I now have a 100-point lead or so on you. So it's going to be, it still comes down to this event, and I can still lose every single accolade I've gained this year. But overall, good tournament there. And in real quick, in fantasy fishing in Rapala, I moved up to 90.7%. So I'm in the top 10 percentile. And I had overall for the event, I'm trying to find it real quick. I think I had like almost 1,200 points. I had 1,159 points, and that was with 2 guys missing the cut. So 1,159, and I moved up into 3,430th place, 3,430th place.
So like Ronnie mentioned there, obviously my fantasy fishing, he said it wasn't the best. I think you could pretty confidently say it was the worst. Might have been the worst. It was certainly the worst. It was certainly the worst I've ever done by about 200 points or more. Yeah, I mean, you can go back and look at who was on my team if that's what you want to do. But after day 1, this is the first time I've ever seen this. After day 1, 3 of my 5 picks were in the bottom 4 anglers in the field. So that just give you an idea of how my fantasy fishing team went. I dropped somewhere from like 95 or 96% in Rapala Bassmaster fantasy fishing, all the way down to 84.5. So we are we didn't just stumble a little bit. We turned around and sprinted the opposite direction that we were trying to go. But as Ronnie said, I did all right in Drain the Lake. I also had Austin Felix, which was a massive help, and currently sit at 99.5%. With a overall rank of 94. So I'll be honest too, and this
20 spots between us. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this would be something we talk about a little bit. But Ronnie and I were texting yesterday, and I texted him a list of about 15 guys that I have left still. And I'll give myself a little bit of credit because it's impressive that I've made it this far to be this high up in the rankings without using. I mean, like, I have so many guys left that I'm going to have to leave some off that are going to do well in this tournament. I would almost guarantee it. So I've almost saved too many guys. Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to seeing how that plays out. Ronnie and I have been giving each other a hard time about it. And I think a lot more people are in on this than just you and I, because I've had several people text me, call me, you name it. I mean, some of our other fantasy pundits, Coy, and some of those guys were like take them down. So
The second that Zona told me in a commercial break to deem myself as the king of fantasy, and everyone thinks that I just did that on my own. The second I did that, I got so many more people who are texting me their lineup saying, I'm beating the king. I thought the king was supposed to be number one. Do you realize how hard it is to be number one? And also what I have going for me that I set my lineups like, in Drain the Lake in January. And
Right.
next year I might create, like a sheet where I do that. And then I go back to picking at each event, and seeing how it does. But I'm very confident in my ability to know a lake, know the time of the year, project what's going to happen, and get within, the realm of reason and do it. I texted you, and I wasn't laughing at you when you were talking about your team. If you were wondering, I was looking at our texts, and Thursday at 5:00 after day one, you said my fantasy team couldn't have done worse if it tried. And I said Rapala or Mercury, and you said Rapala. And then you sent me a screenshot of 87th, 89th, and 90th circled and said, I mean, holy crap, what a meltdown. And he said, I've never seen such a bad performance in fantasy all my time playing. And so I just had to laugh at how you reacted, and it caught me off guard. I thought you were like, oh, it's doing bad. I got 900 points. No, that was pretty bad. But yeah,
it's
Drain the
hard
Lakes.
It's hard to find that many guys that low in the standings that are all in different buckets. I mean, like
it is.
I have to do the fantasy recap story. Obviously, it goes up on the website every, at a couple days after the tournament, every time we have an elite. And, it'd be like the opposite of who's the best pick in each bucket. I think I picked the worst pick. Oh, excuse me, worst pick in at least 2 of the buckets, maybe 3 of the buckets.
I need to click this thing. Hold on, let me see. I'm going to click the last results, and I'm going to sort it the other way and see if they do it backwards, and if there is like a 0.
It was a tough go. I don't want to get into it too much because
I'm sorry. Yeah,
I'm really still when I look at
all your goals are still in front of you.
When I look at the roster that I picked, I still wouldn't like take it back. Other than the fact that I know
not at all. It's just unfortunate. It's just unfortunate.
Did not work out.
It's just unfortunate. Well, let's transition. You got a new slate this week. If there's ever time to have a bad fantasy tournament, like they say, if there's ever bad time to have a bad fishing tournament, it's when you have one right after it and you can forget about it and move on. So you can literally have your worst tournament for only 3 days, and then you can beat me in all these rankings again. So let's get into the Mississippi River picks for Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing and for Mercury Drain the Lake. I will do a quick preview of it though. So the situation here, this is the 5th time we've been to La Crosse, Wisconsin. I think it was like 12, 13, 16, 18, and this year, I think it was 12 and 13, or it was 11 and 12, something like that. But we went 2 times before I started working with B.A.S.S. We've gone 2 times since I started working with B.A.S.S. and this year. So 5th time being here. And from the reports, 3 times we were here, the water level was like 7 to 9 feet. When they have their readout, that's not like 7 to 9 feet high or whatever. I don't know what the happy medium is, but it was 7 to 9 feet. And then the last year we were here, when it was up in the trees and Prosnick and Ish Monroe were going back and forth, it was 13 feet, and it came up that week. Like it had a bunch of rain and storms that came through that week. It came up and was rising, and so it kept going higher every day. So it was at 13 at the highest. Well, 7 to 9 for 3 events, 13 for 1 event, and this week is 5 1/4. That's where the readouts are. So it's lower than it's ever been during an elite event. There's still a little bit of flow to be had. Largemouth and smallmouth should play. The cooling temperatures, I think it's been in the 60s there in the mornings and the evenings for you guys. I don't know what the high has been during the days, but it's getting to that time of the year where you're going to have mixed bags probably to win. There's also the aspect of pool 7, which is the Onalaska pool above La Crosse. La Crosse is the pool 8, and then pool 9 is like the Stoddard pool. It's the next pool down where Iowa ends up meeting Wisconsin. Yeah, every pool is Minnesota and Wisconsin except for the last pool, which I think is mostly Iowa and Wisconsin. And so the only thing this week, there's no culling problems. You just have to be out of Iowa tournament waters by 2 p.m. which if you're in pool 9 at 2 p.m., you're probably missing the lock and you're not going to be there for takeoff or for weigh-in anyway. So everybody, there should not be any problems there. But the one problem, Kyle, I will say is there should be some guys, and we'll see Instagram stories of their buddies across the flat stuck this week because it is lower. There are some shoals and sandbars that some guys should get stuck on, and some concrete, dikes and different things. Hope nobody gets around those and has any problems, but it's definitely going to be a wild one with Angler of the Year, Rookie of the Year, classic spots, a win and in, everything up for grabs this week. And those races are still captivating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the fishing itself will be good. It seems like, obviously the weights are always so tight at the Mississippi River to where, the gap between catching your 12-pound bag and a 15, 16-pound bag is really like, I mean, I guess the margin of error is really small for that. So I think we'll see a lot of jumping up and down the leaderboards, day to day. I think that being consistent is going to be difficult, but I think that's what makes this tournament so interesting. And the fact that, like you said, obviously we've seen smallmouth play in the past for sure. And then we've seen just a strictly largemouth pattern work as well. Like you said, I would suspect we see a little bit of both for sure. And to me, that's what makes this tournament so interesting, because you're going to have guys shallow power fishing, doing, Greg Hackney, John Cox type things, basically flipping, frogging, topwater and whatever. And then you'll see guys fishing for those smallmouth, which is not your traditional, St. Lawrence River type smallmouth fishing either.
Yeah,
I mean, it's completely different, but I'm really looking forward to this event. I've looked forward to it since the schedules came out, because I've always wanted to come up here and see it. So far, I love the town of La Crosse. First time I've ever been here.
Really?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this tournament, and the fact that you take in a stylistically, like, visually appealing tournament, from the fact that guys will be doing really interesting things that are, a variety of different fishing, a variety of different ways, and then add to the fact that, there's obviously so much at stake. There's a lot to be excited about for this tournament, without a doubt.
Yeah, I've been to La Crosse one time, and that was for the 2016 event. I covered Jordan Lee on the final day when he was, trying to win it. I think that was his rookie year, I want to say, because he won the College Classic bracket. No, 2015 or 2016 was his rookie year, one of the deals. But I enjoyed covering him in that event, and it was fun. Frog bites, obviously. And so one thing that's cool is if you get in this area, if you get in an area this week, it's not shooting fish in a barrel. I don't want to say it like that, but it is going to be one of those deals where if you find an area that has a couple fish, there will be a lot more there than you think, because it's probably, if the water rises and it goes out, when it comes back and it's low, it draws them in. So if there's a turn, as you're running through these areas, there could be a turn where the current's going to hit when it does flow through. Maybe it's a pinch down and it creates a little bit more current speed than other places. Those fish can just bunch up off the edge of a grass area or some duckweed, and you can just go to town. And so I don't know if that's a way to win and catch 20 fish, but I know that's a way that you can definitely go get 5 fish pretty quick, and maybe even a big one. We'll see guys selling out and fishing for individual fish, frogging all day, just covering water. We'll see guys fishing those points, Carolina rigs, and maybe some moving baits, wobble heads, things we've seen in the past. And then obviously I think some jerk baits could be in play as well on the main drag. We saw some of the riprap and the rocks and docks in that area of the city area of La Crosse factor. I remember in 2016, Gerald Swindle gave Ott Defoe that quick tip about some fish, and he caught one there that was key for him winning that event. So it's very interesting. I think a lot of our buckets, I think we still have the same amount of people who fished. It should be the same amount. So in 2018, we had 35 or 34 people or something fish Oahe. It would be the same amount for La Crosse because it was the week before Oahe last time. So we did it backwards. We did La Crosse and then we did South Dakota. This year we did South Dakota, then La Crosse. And so for La Crosse, a third of the field's been there in elite competition, and they may have only been there 1 or 2 times, not all of them. And then also there has been an open recently in 2019 there where a handful of people fished in that one and had success. So we've got a little bit more knowledge, and La Crosse is a widely known tournament venue. So there's been people who have fished there quite a bit. Brian Schmidt's won a title there before as well. But yeah, La Crosse is an interesting place. Let's get into fantasy fishing picks real quick, and we will get in on that aspect of it. So let's start with, what do you want to start with, Kyle? Drain the Lake or Rapala?
I would say Rapala, and I say we just do a rapid fire because I don't think either of us are too locked in where we're at with Rapala at this point because of how good we're both doing in Drain the Lake. But I will just go ahead and admit my Rapala picks are pretty lazy. They're pretty lazy picks. But
well, I wouldn't doubt it with you having a tough week last week that you definitely want to just go safe and chalk sometimes. So I understand.
I didn't look at percentages hardly at all. I just went with guys I just genuinely thought would do well, and that's
all
pretty
of them
much
have,
what I went with.
All of them have 65-pound braid on right now, probably. So,
everyone that I'm seeing on my team, I would suspect probably.
Okay, so let's go bucket A. I'm going to go Gerald Swindle for bucket A. He had a top 12 here last time. That was when we did have top 12s. He made a top 12. That was the event that was the next to last event for him winning Angler of the Year. I learned a lot, and I said it on another podcast the other day, but a quick Gerald Swindle story. When we covered his 2016 AOY run, obviously Greg Hackney was in contention for that, had the mistake at Cayuga. So then it became a Keith Combs and Gerald Swindle battle for the last couple of events of the season. Swindle that year ran a GoPro every single day of the tournaments. Hey, did you catch him, G? Yeah, I caught him. Can I use your clip for some highlights on the website? For sure. So I was grabbing his SD card almost every day. He made like 6 out of the 9 top 12s or 7 out of the 9 top 12s. And I made so many clips from that. So one thing I picked up is everyone classifies Gerald Swindle as a junk fisherman. So they're like, oh, of course, junk fishing, smallmouth, largemouth, grass, main river, of course, Mississippi River. There's a different reason that I'm picking him. He is a junk fisherman, but his definition, I finally understood his definition in 2016 at this event. After looking at a season all year long, how many times Gerald would fish with a bait for most of the day. He'd have 10 rods on the deck. He'd be fishing with one bait 90% of the day, but he would put down his rod and pick up another rod and fish it for a cast. And on that first cast, he would catch one it was like 50 or 60 instances where he would pick up a rod, and on his first cast with that new bait, he'd catch a fish. And so that told me there was something going on in his mind, and it wasn't just aimlessly junk fishing. I'm going to tie on everything, and I'm just going to use whatever fits the bill. No, it's calculated. He's very smart with that. And I think an event like this, where you don't have to lock into a certain thing, he can have multiple baits for multiple situations, and he can not use them, or he can use them for a cast or two per day. But those are the most efficient casts you will see. He'll fish 90% of the day with one bait and catch 6 to 10 fish on it. But in that 10%, he'll use 5 other baits, and he will almost go 100% on catching fish with that bait. When he picks it up, it's the right reason. So I'm going Gerald Swindle in bucket A. It's good to see Gerald back in bucket A, obviously, being around classic cut lines in past years and in the 20s or so in AOY at times. Being in the top 20 in AOY at this point in the year is good for him. 5% as well. We've got a lot of Midwest guys in this bucket, as well as our top Angler of the Year performers. We got some shallow guys. So it's something to keep an eye on there. 5%, very affordable for Gerald Swindle, bucket A. Lock it in. Let's go.
So I'm rolling with a hot hand and kind of the local advantage, I guess. When you say local, I mean, it's kind of subjective. It's kind
regional.
Of, yeah. But I'm going Jay Shakurat in bucket A. I think he's obviously got a lot to fish for. I mean, he's sitting really, really well, obviously, in Rookie of the Year. So, I mean, I'm trying to think of the word, but he's going to, he feels the pressure, I guess, to have a good event. Obviously, we've had him on the podcast, and he talked about how he likes to fish rivers, obviously this river being one of them. So I'm sure he's looking forward to it, has a lot to fish for. The urgency, that's the word I was looking for. There's a sense of urgency to have a good event, and obviously kind of, just lock away the Rookie of the Year. But I'm going with Jay Shakurat. Obviously a first place finish, a 13th place finish. Definitely think he'll finish the event strong. Higher player percentage. I think he's the 3rd highest in the bucket at 15.5. But like I said previously, I don't really care about player percentages this event, and I'm going Jay Shakurat.
One thing I'll say is, remember when he had that downturn in performance at Fork and at Pickwick, and we were wondering if he was going to do Rookie of the Year. So my thoughts on this, it makes sense. The first 4 events of the year were shallow, pre-spawn, spawn events. Then we get the northern stretch with the 3 events at the end of the year. And if he does well in this last event, those 7 events that he's done well in this year classify everything Minnesota-wise and Wisconsin-wise that you could fish. Talking about shallow, largemouth, grass fishing, kind of flipping, pitching type stuff. And then also the smallmouth, clearer water, post, summertime deal. So it looks like Jay needs to just sure up. And it could have been 2 flukes. Who knows? He might just go win AOI next year. But it looks like Jay and some of those Midwest guys that struggle on the elites, they either let Florida get the best of them or they struggle with post-spawn summer largemouth tournaments in the South. It's one of those where it doesn't ever get that hot in Minnesota, I feel, post-spawn. The water temp never hits 90. So they don't ever have those types of conditions. And I feel like those are the 2 events that he might have struggled with. It's the 2 that he has the chance to right those wrongs in coming years. So we'll keep an eye on that. But otherwise, great performance for Jay. We will get to see Brandon Polinick and Brandon Lester on day 1 on live with the cameras in the boats for the AOI race. Obviously, Chris Johnston's still in the race too, but we will see if he fights for it, and maybe we can have him on another day if he ends up putting his name in the hat even more so. And then the other 2 that we have is Jay Shakir and Cody Huff, because Jay could knock it out through the first 2 days. He can't knock it out after day 1. Because it is going to be so volatile. If you catch him day 1, he could fall right back down, or vice versa with Cody Huff. He could struggle and then catch him. So we're going to keep an eye on those 2 races, the first 2 days of competition. And then the other 2, we have got 2 guys who are right below the classic cut line. They're just on the outside looking in, and they're trying to make it in. So we'll keep an eye on that race as well. So let's go to Bucket B, and you give me your pick.
Yeah, so I'm going with the power in Bucket B. I'm going Greg Hackney, 12.1% player percentage, so fairly high. Not too bad, of course. But Seth Feider's eating up a ton of the percentage there, 31.3. Obviously, have Christie 12.7. There's definitely some higher percentages in the bucket, but I shot some content 2 days ago with Greg Hackney when I first got to town. And he said something to me that makes me think that he's about to go smash him. And I told him, I said, actually kind of on the conversation of forward-facing sonar and graphs, I said, well, at least this will be a tournament where, a lot of guys have the opportunity to not be looking at their graphs the whole time if they want to. And he had his little Greg Hackney grin. You know exactly what I'm talking about. He said, oh, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to do what it takes to win. But he said, I'm going to do what I want to do. And when he said that, I was like, you know what? You give Greg Hackney an opportunity to do what he wants to do and fish the way he likes to fish. He's going to be dangerous. And I've said this before, probably on the podcast, that if it's a shallow water power fishing event, there's always going to be a really high percentage chance that he's on my team. So I got Greg Hackney in Bucket B.
I've got a great, we went down to Louisiana and Mississippi to shoot with him for a Phoenix feature that'll be coming out in the next couple of weeks after the season's done. And I hope to get the audio from the cameraman who shot it. We're going to put that audio in the podcast of Greg Hackney talking about, I asked him the question of what he would want to tell young anglers nowadays when it comes to learning. And he said, go fish, go be out in nature, go see the conditions change and have that in your memory bank. So when it changes during a tournament, you're not unfamiliar with it. You remember it, you recognized it, and you can learn from it. So that dude is definitely cerebral. I love his mannerisms. I know that you had a ball with him shooting some content as well. And so Greg Hackney's going to be fishing in his wheelhouse. He's also 28th place in AOI. He's fallen down a little bit from a poor performance at Oahe, but 28th place, 506 points. And Kyle, I've done the math the last few weeks, and 506 was the projected point total like 4 events ago for the Classic cut line. That's the projected point total for the Classic right now. So unofficially, if Greg Hackney didn't catch a bass this week and zeroed and got 0 points for this event, he would still be at the projected Classic point line. Whether it goes up by 1 or 2 this week or goes down by 1 or 2, he's at that line. So as soon as he catches one and weighs it in, That is 10 points to his credit minimum, and he will be locked into the Classic. So he's going to fish free this week. Everyone from 28th and up is probably in that same boat. Even the next 5 or 6 spots below Hackney could be locked in if they catch one fish and make it back to weigh in. They'll get their minimum points for the tournament at least, and they'll be good to go. So in bucket B, I'm going to go with a guy. I didn't go with Fighter. I didn't go with Hackney or Christie. Those guys are eating up a good percentage, over 50% between those three for this bucket. Caleb Kufal's got another 11%. I'm going with Luke Palmer, 1.2%. He's never been to the Mississippi River, so I'm not doing it for history reasons. I'm doing it for stylistically. I think that he's in that same boat of in the Classic projected cut line already, so he can fish more free. He knocked that out last week. He's comfortable, and I think that if he can put down the spinning rods from Oahe and go back to what he likes to do, flipping a bad mama, throwing a pad crasher and doing all that stuff in the grass. And even if he did get out on the main drag and, fish around for some smallmouth, he's got plenty of Oklahoma smallmouth who probably react a lot like the Wisconsin fish compared to other smallmouth in the country. I'm comfortable with Luke Palmer. I love that percentage. This was just a gut pick. There was no reason to pick him. There's a lot of people other than him that have good styles for this place as well, and history here, but no history here, a positive mindset about it. Last event of the year, wants to end it strong, and it's in his style. I'm interested to see how he does. So Luke Palmer, bucket B for me. Then when it comes to bucket C, I'm going to pick another guy that doesn't have a ton of experience here, but it suits his style well. He's really been consistent at the ends of the year. So normally this has been a bugaboo for him in the AOY Racing Classic hunt, is starts out strong down south, fades up north. Well, this year he needed his up north to bail out his down south. He did not do too great in a couple Florida and Santee Cooper events. And so going up north really helped him. He's really turned it around and gotten inside that Classic cut line, because bucket C, about half of them are in the Classic, half of them are out. So this is a make or break bucket on the AOY and Classic race. So I'm going with Caleb Summerall. I think this is a good tournament for him, and I think that coming off a couple solid events up north, he's got the momentum train going to end the year out, and he needs to catch him one more time to make the Classic. He's in 40th in points, about 5 or 10 points ahead of the Classic cut line. So he needs to do something. Go make the day 3 cut and improve a little bit on your positioning, and he'll be A-okay for the Classic. But sweating it out a little bit, but much better than he was looking just 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, and ironically, this is kind of the same thing that happened last week when we talked about our Oahe picks. But I did not go with Caleb Summerall, but he was my solid secondary selection in my story for the same reason that I like Bill Lowen. So, stylistically, it seems like they both match really well. The urgency for Summerall to catch them is definitely there. And kind of the same way with Lowen, a few spots outside of the Classic cut, obviously needs to catch them really well here. If he's going to make his 12th Bassmaster Classic, he's going to need to catch them here at the Mississippi River. It's a place that he's had some positive finishes. I want to say I remember seeing that he had a 7th place finish, and in 4 trips, he's made the cut 3 different times. So I think that obviously it's a place that he probably meshes really well with from a style standpoint, and definitely a tad higher percentage. Again, I think it was like 13, wasn't massive, but yeah, 13.3%. I just think that it fits up too well for his style, and he needs to catch them, to try to get inside that Classic cut. So I'm going with Bill Lowen and C.
I like Bill Lowen. Overall, as a human, he's a pretty good dude, but overall in fantasy as well, he's on my Drain the Lake team, and we'll tease that for just a few minutes when we get to that. But take us on into bucket D, because I have no qualms with your Bill Lowen pick.
So bucket D, another style pick, and for the sake of, we've already talked about it a little bit, but the fact that it's a win in your in style tournament, and once you start getting into bucket D, bucket E, obviously that's their best hope of, making the Classic, is winning this tournament. And, for me, I got to go with my guy, Wes Logan, in bucket D. I think that despite the relatively high player percentage, 16.8, looks like a lot of people are thinking like me on this one. Mississippi River being a place that he can take all of his strengths and really do well here. You know, I could easily see him going for broke, trying to win the tournament, try to make the classic. And then, you know, you talked about that 2019 Open that was here, obviously finished third in that one. I had the opportunity to hang out with him a few days ago at Oahe, and he was talking about how he really does like the Mississippi River, and, you know, his time fishing up there for writers conferences and other things of that nature have always been positive. So I think that, you know, he's got a lot going for him in the sake that he's just going to go out there, try to win the tournament, I imagine. And I could easily see Wes Logan be, you know, having a great tournament here.
Yeah, bucket D was the hardest bucket for me because I stayed away from Wes Logan. I stayed away from Justin Atkins, which, hey, kudos to you. You had to make a decision. You were torn because both your buddies and both your most picked fantasy guys are in this bucket, and you had to pick one of them. So you chose with Wes Logan. I will say that other than Wes Logan and Justin Atkins, there really isn't anyone else in this bucket that's got a great track record. I mean, I clicked through 10 or 12 guys other than Steve Kennedy, which you could pick Steve Kennedy. He's just on my no pick list. I mean, if you're a fan of fantasy fishing, you can do that, pick him. It's a solid pick for sure, but I don't pick him because he's on my no pick list. I've sworn off Steve Kennedy for that reason. So besides Steve Kennedy, besides some of those guys who fished the Open, Wes Logan, Justin Atkins that did well, and maybe a John Cruz who's had success there but has 28% of the player base pick, none of these other guys really have a great resume there. Todd Otten's never been there. Clint Davis, I know that this was his last event in 2018, and then he got kicked out of the elites, went to the FLW tour, won the Forest Wood Cup in 2019, then came back to the elites. So, you know, not the best memories for Davis here at this place. Looking down the list, Kobe Krieger hasn't done super great here. Mark Menendez hasn't done as great as you'd think he would have. Paul Mueller has done terrible here. Bernie Schultz as well. There's a lot of people who haven't really had great success here in the guys who have fished 3 or 4 times here. But there are guys like Jake Whitaker who's fished here once that has done well. But I'm going to go with Daryl Gleason. I think that Daryl's a good grinder. I think he is good at like Coosa River places, which they kind of, those spotted bass in the current kind of react in the way they tuck up in places to the main drag of La Crosse. Even if the current's not flowing super strong, it still is a current based place. So knowing how fish set up, that's important. He's not afraid to throw a Carolina rig and a drop shot around if he wants to fish for smallmouth, but he's not afraid to frog as well and flip. So I'm looking at Daryl Gleason there, 1.3%. Like you said, he's got to catch them, not only to stay on the elites, but also to maybe make the classic if he can win this event. Not maybe make the classic if he wins. He will make the classic if he wins this event, but maybe improve his AOY if he has a good event here. So looking at Daryl Gleason for this one, I think that I've liked what I've seen from him bouncing back and stuff. And I think he had a solid event at Oahe, and that's just positive. When you have a 2-week stretch, you can use it one of 2 ways. You have a terrible event. Oh, well, I'm already focused on the next one. If you have a good event, you're feeling good, you're trusting your decisions, you're confident in what you're doing as you roll into the next event. So I think Daryl will be confident this week going into the Mississippi River to round out the season. So I'm looking at that one. That's a little different pick, but man, I honestly looked at this bucket and there was no one that really had a great reputation that wasn't highly picked percentage-wise, which I think could go to reasons why some of those guys were picked highly. Let's go to bucket E now. I'm going to go, because in bucket E, we've discussed this all year. We'll just list them off. Hank Cherry, Keith Combs, Matt Herron, Mike Iaconelli, Kyle Welcher. Those are guys that you wouldn't expect to be in bucket E. Justin Hamner, even after his first year in the elites last year, he was, did very well, made the classic, was a contender there. You've got a lot of guys in this bucket that have the ability to win, that have won at this level, that have the ability to do so. And so thinking about that, you can go for one of those because they might try to go for the win and in aspect. But you can also go for just a guy who's maybe going to be a rock solid angler. I'm going to go with Keith Combs because, surprisingly, from what people probably would expect, he does have a great track record here in La Crosse. Whether it's back in 2012s or 13s, whether it's those early events or whether it's the most recent events, he's got a pretty solid track record. He's actually very underrated for smallmouth fishing when it comes to, St. Lawrence River. He's got a great track record most of the time there. And some of these other places like Champlain, I'd expect Keith Combs to do well, whether he targets frogfish, and largemouth, or he targets smallmouth. I think that Combs is 3.6%. I think that Combs figures out something and puts it together this week to kind of end his year on a strong note, because this is back-to-back years that I'm a little shocked with Keith Combs. So I know he's going to take something out of this year, and I think it's going to be a good Mississippi River finish for him.
I also went with Keith Combs and Bucket E for the same
Look at
reason.
us.
Obviously has a lot of positive history in 4 Elite Series events. I actually put this in the story. That's why I have it. Has finished 32nd or better 3 of those times. So, I mean, obviously, like you said, does have a good track record here. The last time I remember looking, his player percentage was 3.6%.
Yeah.
I don't know that you could really justify picking anybody else in the bucket super highly over him. So it's a little surprising to see, just 3.1%, but or 3.6, excuse me. But yeah, I'm going Keith Combs as well. I think that's a good pick, and I could easily see him being one of those guys that would really benefit from the win and you're in, type of mindset. Just really going for it, which it can make things a little tricky too, because if somebody really goes for it too much, I mean, you can definitely, if you try to hit a home run in baseball, you'll strike out probably more times than you'll hit a home run. But I don't know. We'll see. I think that Keith Combs is definitely a really good pick in Bucket E. And like we said, it's a little surprising he's not higher pick, to be honest.
Who was it? Aaron Judge that year. He had the most strikeouts in the major leagues, and he also had the most home runs in the major leagues. There's Vladimir Guerrero would do that back in the day,
I mean, in Major League Baseball, that's become the norm. I mean, your big strikeout guys also are the guys that are up there at the top of hitting home runs. So it's just kind of the way it is. And hopefully that's not the case for these guys that we're picking lower in these buckets, but we'll see.
I think one thing that's also underrated about if you don't want to take history into effect, finishes, because it is different this year, the one thing you can take from the guys who have fished 3 or 4 times here before is that they know which areas were dicey at the levels of 7 feet, 9 feet. If those areas were shallow and risk of getting stuck, or what they looked like at those levels, then at 5 feet, they know what those levels are like. And so they can practice much more efficiently. They can cross off a pool that maybe is just too shallow for them. They don't like that pool because of the water level it's at. And whereas some guys who are going for the first or second time, they're going to go explore up there and maybe waste some practice time. So some of these guys who have fished there maybe don't have the best finishes. They at least know what it looked like, what it looks like now, and maybe some areas that are just, you might as well not even go in there and try. You're going to waste your time, or you're going to actually get stuck. So that's one thing to consider as well for fantasy fishing, is guys using their history other than just top finishes. It's figuring it out in a different way. So give me a winning weight. I've got 65 pounds, 13 ounces. It's mid 60s. My buddy Cade Laufenberg is a stick in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and anywhere in the Midwest. Really catches them well and knows this place. And he is very pleased with how it's fishing. He said when the schedule came out, he said, this is going to be terrible. What a terrible event we're going to have in La Crosse. And he said, like a month ago, I might be a little wrong about that. It's actually fishing pretty well this summer. I've been pretty pleased with it despite the levels and the water's conditions. So he's very pleased. He thinks it might take a little more than people think. And so I'm going mid 60s with 65-13.
I actually went a little lower. I went with 61-10. So I mean,
just a pound different a day.
Yeah. So I mean, 61 per 4 days. I mean, that's 15 and a quarter. I think that's probably fair. I think that you'll definitely see bigger bags than that for sure. But like we were saying, it seems like you looking back at all the other tournaments that have been here in the past, being consistent is not easy. So I mean, I think that a good mid-range 15, 16 pounds a day would definitely be right around the area that think it would take to win, but we shall see. Hopefully I'm wrong and it takes a lot more.
Yeah, exactly. That would be a fun event to see some bigger weights, but I think we will see a big weight, especially with the conditions that we have. We have some cloudy, rainier conditions on day 1 and 2. So we may see some different patterns there that we won't see day 3 and 4. There might be some changes, which means there might be some big bags to be had doing something different. So that's something to consider as well. Conditions on the weather. Let's go into Mercury Drain the Lake. I'm confirming right here. I'm just looking at my team, making sure I picked all the right people for this lineup. I've got him. Okay, I have all 8 selected for my team, but why don't you start us off and give us 4 guys maybe some of the ones that might line up with your Rapala fantasy fishing. If they do, if you have any of the matchup, go ahead and let's put those in your first four and we'll discuss those. And then we'll go to my first four and vice versa.
So of the first four, three of them do match. So I have Gerald Swindle, Jay Shakurat, Bill Lowen, and Wes Logan are my first four.
So you said Logan, Shakurat, Lowen, and Swindle?
Yes.
Okay, I have those four as well.
Okay, so then my next four would be Kufal, Fighter, Downey, and Douglas.
Okay, well, I've got Downey, Fighter, but then I've got Hudnall and Schlapper. Schlapper. I used Caleb Kufal for a top 10 at Chickamauga, so I don't feel bad about that. And then I used Josh Douglas for a barely missed cut at the St. Lawrence River. So looks like in Mercury Drain the Lake, a lot of people probably saved Minnesota and Wisconsin anglers for this last event of the season. If you used any of them, I hope you used them in good events where they, got you some major points, because this week in bucket B, I picked Luke Palmer for Rapala in bucket B, and there was like 7 Wisconsin and Minnesota anglers, because it just felt like you could just easily pick the wrong one. And so I just didn't know who to pick if you had to single one out. So in Mercury Drain the Lake, where I'm picking 8 anglers, I've saved those guys for this year, for this event. And Lowen, Downey, Fighter, Logan, Hudnall, Shakurat, Schlapper, and Swindle are my guys that I picked back in January for this event. It's kind of lined out that way. I'm very happy with the way those picks are still sitting. And I think that if there's any picks that need to be explained, you already explained Lowen, Fighter, Logan, and I've already done Swindle. I think you did Shakurat as well. But for Schlapper, man, he's been on a roll this year with big fish. And I think we could maybe see him pop off a 5 or 6 pounder on day 1 of this event, maybe day 2 of this event. And it really help your fantasy fishing team. That's something to consider in a tight weight event. Big bass are important. And so for this event, the bonus points aspect of it, and then also picking a winner. Do you know this year how many winners you've picked in Drain the Lake? Because that is a huge factor, getting those bonus points. I got 3 times the points for Christie winning, and then I got double points for Livesey, Lester, and Felix's victories. So I've had 4 of the 8 events or 4 of the 9 events so far. I've picked the winner. I think honestly at the Harris Chain, I had like 2nd, 3rd, 4th. So I was so close picking the winner there. And then I had 2nd and 3rd at Chickamauga. So I was close to picking winners there as well. So picking a winner is very important, and it can change your outcome for sure. So have you picked any this year?
I've picked several. I don't know. I think my number would probably be about the same. I think 4.
Did you pick Christie and Livesey for sure?
Yes, I know for sure I picked those, but I picked Christie for Chickamauga and not.
Oh, okay, not for Classic.
Chickamauga win and not the Classic. I'm trying to think early on in the season. I did have John Cruz.
You got double there
on my roster.
Didn't have Buddy Gross.
No, did not have Buddy Gross.
Then did you have Drew Cook at Santee?
Pickwick, I did have Lester. I'm pretty sure I had
Lester for Pickwick. Yeah. And then St. Lawrence, you didn't have Shakurat. So yeah.
I did not have Shakurat, and I did have
Felix.
So I guess I've technically picked
kind of like 5 times.
5. Yeah, but I didn't have the Classic for the triple points. So
yeah, so I kind of made up a little ground on that. Yeah, your 5 victors have gotten you 1,500 points. My 4 victors have gotten me 1,100 points. I think that's right.
Right.
No. That would be 12. No, your 5 victors have given you. Your 5 victors have given you an extra 1,500 points. My 4 victors have given me 1,800 points because 900 for my 3 regular season and 900 for the Classic. So,
and it could be obviously a tad different because you'd have those bonus points like you mentioned for
just big bass and stuff. Yeah. But just
here,
in general, the 300 extra points or whatever it is. So
right.
So yeah, that's Mercury Drain the Lake for us. It was pretty simple. We're pretty straightforward on that one. Who are the couple that you left off that you maybe have saved that you're worried about doing well this week?
So that's like I said earlier, I texted you and told you that yesterday, just to list some of the guys that I have left that I'm a little afraid about not using. Todd Otten, Kenta Kimura, Brock Mosley, Luke Palmer, Tyler Avett, Pat Schlapper, Caleb Summerall. And then there's a few more, but yeah, those are all guys I haven't used at all this year. And as of right this second, they're not on my team. So a little upset with myself for not planning that out a little bit better throughout the season. But it got to the point where I was saving so many guys for this last tournament that I've just saved too many, I guess. So
I'm definitely going to see you. You're definitely going to be on the spreadsheet game like I was this year to make sure you had them all spaced out. But
probably.
I am not. So looking at the end of the year, I've got about 8 to 10 guys that I have not used, and they would be Bernie Schultz, Carl Jocumsen, Daryl Gleason, Gary Klaus, Rick Klund, Kenta Kimura, Dice K, David Fritz, Jay Yellis, Alex Redwine, Ed Lochran, Frank Talley, and there might be another one. I didn't use Chad Morgan Taylor, but I had him on for this event. And actually, I had Pat Schlapper on the outside looking in, had Morgan Taylor for this event. And because he dropped out of the elites and retired, I got to sub in somebody. And so I subbed in Pat Schlapper. And so there we have it. Fantasy fishing. This is going to be a great event, but it's different. It's Friday to Monday because we had a back-to-back and there was a 9-hour driving distance. They gave them a day off, which was Monday. So practice is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for this week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. One cool thing, we will have 10 cameras for day 2, 3, and 4. We normally have 6, 6, 10, and 10. This week we have 6, 10, 10, 10. So we're going to end the year with some AOI drama possibly. Somebody asked me to predict it. I'm going to ask you right now. Brandon Polinick has a 37-point lead over Brandon Lester. And I will say Brandon Polinick has not had the best reputation here. In 4 trips here previously, he was leading and got DQ'd for the culling infraction, which he has now set the trend and innovated because we have gotten that culling rule removed. Thank you, Brandon. Sorry it had to come in the way it did. But he got DQ'd from an event. He's missed 2 cuts for events. And he's made a cut in the 30s, I believe. So he's only been in the money 1 time out of 4 times if we count the DQ year, which it doesn't go in the bank account as a check because he didn't get one. But there was also, he was leading that event. So for Brandon, 25% of the time he's been in the top, part of the field for the cut. So it's not a sure thing that he can win the AOI this week. I don't doubt him, his abilities. But Lester moved into that territory that we talked about on this very podcast previewing Oahe. If someone can be within 35 to 40 points of Brandon, which is Brandon, so Brandon's within Brandon's range, Lester has moved within 37 points. So he is within that 35 to 40 point range, which I basically picked that range out. It's not an easy point gap to make up, but I picked it out because that means Brandon Polinick can finish, he can make the day 3 cut and finish 40th to 47th, somewhere in that range. You can make the cut and just be the bottom 10 or so. And Lester can make a top 10 and still have a shot to win AOI. If you can make it, you don't have to have Brandon finish in the 70s for Lester to be able to maybe win this event or win AOI. Brandon Polinick can still have a pretty good event and Lester can still win AOI. That's the range I was looking for. Lester is within that range. I think Chris Johnston's 46 back. And then I think Drew Benton's 50 points back or something like that. I think those are or David Mullins is 50 points back, somebody like that. It's right there. But our previous 2nd and 3rd place guys, Mullins and Cox, have fallen back to, I think, 4th and 5th in points. So it's going to be a race at the top. Who do you think wins AOI, Kyle, Jessie?
I've still got Brandon Polinick. I definitely think it's going to be an interesting event. He's definitely left the door open far more than it was at Oahe. Having a bad event there definitely didn't do him any favors whatsoever. But with that being said, I think that I still think he's going to get it done. I don't foresee, the pressure getting to him or anything like that. I think that Polinick's probably still got it, where he needs it. With that being said, I definitely not counting Lester out because I definitely could easily see Lester having a good event, making it really, really interesting. But yeah, I'm still going with Polinick. I don't think that's a crazy pick by any means, obviously, but no. I'm guessing that Polinick's going to do it.
I don't blame anyone for picking either one of these guys, or even Chris Johnston. He's still got a shot there. Obviously, 46. He needs Brandon to miss the cut. Let me look at Lacrosse for Lester. He's finished 26th. And then when it was flooded, higher than it's ever been, he finished 95th. So that's not exciting to see a 95th for Lester. But when it was closer to what the conditions are now, he got 26th. So maybe Lester can do it. I said on a podcast this week with Anglers Channel, they asked me about this, and I said, I think Palaniuk wins, but I think it gets within 10 points. I think Lester makes a really good run at it this week and just falls just a few points short of doing it. Man, I would love to see either one of them win, but I would love to see Lester win, because it would prove, I have to go back in the archives and find it, but I think after he won the Open in Florida, I think I said on the podcast, I think he's going to win an Elite this year now. It's going to set momentum in Brandon Lesson's favor. And I think that he could win Angler of the Year. And he was my pick for Angler of the Year. And so I want to go back and see if I did officially say that on the podcast. But that was my vibe, was, man, he could really use that momentum from the Open. He could do well in the Elites, and he could maybe win Angler of the Year. And now here he is, second. So super happy for him to have this stretch at the end of the year where he's really performed well. So we'll see how it goes. I was shocked to see no one really capitalize on Palaniuk's struggle at Oahe with Mullins and Cox. Both of them finished right around him below the cut. So it opened the door for more people. But one race we'll look at, 5th place through 8th place, those 4 spots in Angler of the Year. If you're looking at the progressive Angler of the Year race, 5th to 8th, that's John Cox, Chris Zaldain, Drew Benton, and Patrick Walters. They are separated by 4 points. It is literally 1 point per spot from 5th to 8th. And those guys will be fighting for money on the line. With Progressive as our Angler of the Year sponsor this year, the payout for the top 10, you want every dollar possible. And so the possibility for Walters to easily, I mean, we're going to see guys finish within 5 or 6 spots, and they could drop 3 or 4 Angler of the Year spots because it's so tight from 5th to 8th. So we'll keep an eye on that as well. Also, it's tight. There's a little bit of a gap, but it's tight from 9th to 10th. It's only 1 point there as well. They're about a dozen behind the other group in front of them, though. So, and honestly, looking at some surprises down the leaderboard before we end this deal, Kenta Kimura in 11th place, definitely like comeback player of the year if we've ever had one on the Elites, finishing in the 60s to 70s last year in points, and now 11th in the race. What a great season for him. We get Scott Canterbury with a bounce back year after winning Angler of the Year and then missing the classics the next few years. He's bounced back in the top 20. We see Caleb Kufal making his first classic appearance with a top 19 right now. Gerald Swindle's back in the top 20. Good to see that. And then Clifford Perch, Tyler Rivette, some of those guys solidified their classic with great finishes at Oahe. So we'll also keep an eye on 2 double qualifiers, Lee Livesey and Jason Christie. If they can stay in the top 39 or 40, they will be able to help double qualify and move it down that Angler of the Year list a little bit. So we'll keep an eye on winning in. Kyle, enjoy La Crosse, Wisconsin. Man, make sure you have that long lens on and get some frog blow-ups for me, because that's some of the coolest photos you'll take all year, seeing them wake through some duckweed. Man, the visuals we see in La Crosse are incredible. I'm excited for it.
I am too. I'm really excited for this tournament and for this.
Is this your first time here?
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
This is my first time here, so I'm definitely looking forward to it. It's always been on my bucket list as a place to fish because of all the Elite Series events here in the past. Obviously, it's like the perfect style matchup for the way I like to, catch them when I can, is, fishing a frog, flipping, doing anything that has to do, like you said, with braid and or heavy line, heavy rod, that kind of thing. So I'm always look forward to coming up here, and I'm anxious to get the tournament started and get to see it out on the water.
Well, when is your flight out of Wisconsin back home?
It's out of Minneapolis on Monday.
On Monday?
Tuesday. On Tuesday. Tuesday, okay. Yes. Tuesday.
Well, if it's like a noon flight or something, maybe you can get out there for an hour with Cade Laufenberg on Tuesday and catch you a frogfish in the duckweed, and then hit the road 3 hours up to Minneapolis, I think. I made that drive a couple times, so it's definitely a cool place. Get some cheese curds while you're there. You got to do that if you haven't already, and enjoy it. Last event of the season, man. We appreciate your work on the podcast, joining with me and taking the time on the road to do it. But, buddy, enjoy it. We will see you on Bassmaster Live. I saw you in the background of some guys. So keep up the good work, and we'll round out this Angler of the Year race and the Classic race and the Elite season for 2022.
Let's do it.